All right, part 2 of Joseph. And if you missed last week, you can catch up by going to our YouTube channel or Facebook page and see our introduction to Joseph. And so I'm not going to recap what we looked at last week. We're just going to dive right in to where we left him off last time. Last time we left Joseph at the end of chapter 37. He had been sold into slavery by his brothers, and he was headed off to Egypt and sold to somebody named Potiphar. And so that's all we know of Joseph at that point through chapter 37. And he's such a big character that we get this little introduction of him, and then immediately we switch gears in chapter 38 to talking about Judah. And we get a whole chapter about Judah, and then we go back into chapter 39 and pick up Joseph through essentially the rest of the book. And that's on purpose. It may feel like some kind of weird detour that the author takes, just kind of this strange little interruption that happens. But it is very, very intentional, and we're going to look tonight at why that is. But, you know, the core message behind what I want to communicate tonight about the story of Joseph, first of all, is simply a reminder that, like we saw last time, that even though this is the big section of the book about Joseph, that it's ultimately not about Joseph. It's about God's promise to Abraham, through Isaac, through Jacob, and then through Jacob's sons, to fulfill his promise and to keep his word as he said he would, right? So Joseph takes center stage in this story, but he's not the only character that we explore in this. But as we look at chapters 38 and 39 tonight, we're going to see a really strong contrast on two different takes on integrity. We're going to see someone who has integrity, who stands up for what is right, and we're going to see someone who gives in to every single impulse he has ever had in his entire life. That's Judah, by the way. Joseph was the first one. But as we think about the kind of the main idea behind tonight, I want us to remember that integrity doesn't always lead to immediate reward. It just simply doesn't always lead us to some kind of immediate reward. In fact, it is going to position you, though, for God's greater purpose in your life. And we're going to see what we mean by that. You know, some of the most important decisions that you make in your entire life, some of those really critical, like pivotal moments in your life where you had to make a decision, do I go this way or do I go this way? Those decisions that you make that really shape the trajectory of your life are oftentimes ones that no one else knows about. They're those private struggles, those internal decisions that maybe your spouse knows about, and there may be one or two close people to you that know what you're wrestling with and know the ultimate decision you make. But in general, thinking about the public at large, most people will never know those crucial decisions that you make. The ones that happen when no one's watching, when no one is there to criticize or applaud, when no one is any the wiser as to which option you chose out of the myriads of options that you had available to you. Tonight's message is about making those decisions in those secret places. It's about having the character to make those decisions in those secret places, and about how God prepares us and equips us in those moments for bigger impact later on. So let's jump into chapter 38. At that time, meaning after Joseph had been sold into Egypt and had been given to Potiphar, at that time, Judah left his brothers and settled near an Adullamite named Hira. And there Judah saw the daughter of a Canaanite named Shua, and he took her as a wife, and he slept with her, and he conceived, and he gave birth to a son, and she named him And he named him She conceived again and gave birth to a son, and named him Onan. And she gave birth to another son and named him Shelah. And it was at Chezib that she gave birth to him. So in these first couple of verses, we as I mentioned, we take that little detour and we start talking about Judah. Now you remember Judah was the brother. He's one of the older brothers of Joseph, and he was the one that had the brilliant idea to sell Joseph to the traveling tradesmen, right? It was Judah in chapter 37 that said, hey, why should his blood be on our hands? Let's just sell him. Let's stage a crime scene, and let's just make it look like he was killed, but we didn't actually kill him, so we can be off the hook, right? This was Judah's the way his mind worked, right? And that's who we're talking about now. So he goes to, and I circled here an Adullamite named Hira. Now this was a Canaanite, right? That's who this was, and that is important. That plays into it here a bit for us. And then I underlined here the three names of his sons, Onan, and Shelah, right? So those are his three sons, and he married a Canaanite, but he first moved to live near or with another Canaanite. Now, his grandparents and his great-grandparents, Abraham and Isaac, were just abundantly clear that Israelites, that those people of Abraham's lineage, those descendants of Abraham were not to marry Canaanite people. Canaanites were known for their moral bankruptcy. They did not fear God. They did not follow God. They certainly didn't worship the God of Abraham. And Abraham told Isaac in chapter 24, I believe it is, that, pull that up on the screen for me, Max. Yep, chapter 24, that Abraham said to his servants, I will have you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live. He tells his chief of staff, you will not let my son marry a Canaanite. And then a little bit later, Isaac tells his son Jacob in chapter 28, he blessed him and he said, listen, do not marry a Canaanite girl, right? Abraham tells Isaac, no, don't marry a Canaanite. Isaac tells Jacob, don't marry a Canaanite. Now we have Jacob and his sons, who we don't have the explicit command from Jacob here that he told his sons not to marry a Canaanite. But you can imagine that within the family tradition, this was said, right? Don't marry a Canaanite. We are to follow, if we are believing in the promise that God made to Abraham and that God's lineage, the lineage that he has promised to Abraham stays in that family, you don't mingle that with pagan cultures. And yet that's exactly what we see Judah do here in chapter 38. He moves, he leaves his family, maybe out of guilt for what he had done to his brother, but he moves and lives with a buddy, and that just is in itself a reminder to us that the company you keep can lead you to do actions that you maybe would not have done before. And that's where we find Judah. So Judah has these three sons, Onan, and Shelah. And a heads up, this is about to get PG-13. Because if you know this story, you know it's one of the craziest stories in the entire Bible. All right? So, we don't have any kids in here tonight, so we're good. Let's roll with it. Who is Judah's firstborn son, it says that he was wicked. He was evil in the Lord's eyes, right? And God killed him for it. I don't know what he did. I don't know what kind of person he was, but he was a bad enough dude that God punished him for his evilness and killed him. And had taken a wife named Tamar. Now, in this culture, when a man would die and leave his widow childless, it was the responsibility of the deceased's brother to take the widow. My mic is really causing problems tonight, isn't it? I'm just going to use one of these handheld. Turn this one off, Ben. I got mic 3. All right, I'm just going to do this. Let's make sure that works. Sorry for that. That was distracting to me, so I know it was distracting to you. All right, so we're just going to use the handheld from now on. Let's start all over. No. So in this culture, that's how it would work. When a man died, then his brother would assume the responsibility of giving a child to the widow, to his brother's wife. Weird, right? Now, it gets weirder because when that brother would father a child with that widow, it was not considered his child. It was considered his dead brother's child. Are you following with me? So Onan had the responsibility of marrying Tamar and giving her a child that would be the son or daughter of Ur, even though Ur was dead. This was very common. This was a custom in this time. We think it's weird. God forbid something happens to Ian. Hannah, I'm sorry, I'm not marrying you. And I'm quite certain you feel the same way. But we just think that's weird in our culture, right? We wouldn't do that. But that was very commonplace. It was expected. That was the expectation. And so Onan says, sure, I'll marry Tamar. So he marries her, but then he makes a pretty crucial mistake. He sleeps with her, but he has zero intention of getting her pregnant. And he takes certain steps to make sure that that happens, right? I'm going to keep it PG as much as I can here. And the Lord sees that as evil. He used Tamar for his own pleasure, but denied any responsibility in it. It was all self-serving for Onan. And God said, no, that's not happening. And God kills Onan. And then Shelah is like, oh, dang, it's my turn. But Judah steps in and goes, I've already lost 2 of my 3 sons. I don't want to lose a 3rd son. So he lies to Tamar, and he tells Tamar, okay, you can have my 3rd son, but let's let him get a little bit older first. Let's wait till he grows up a little bit, fully knowing well that he is not about to give his 3rd son to Tamar because he doesn't want to risk Shelah doing the same thing that Onan did and losing a 3rd son. So he is denying his obligation to Tamar, his cultural obligation to Tamar. And this goes on for a long time. We don't know exactly how long, but eventually, in the course of things, Judah's wife, the Canaanite, dies. And the story gets weirder from here. Judah's wife dies, and he goes through a long period of mourning, and then he goes back to work. And as he's going back to work, Tamar realizes that she's never going to get the child that she was promised. She's never going to get that 3rd husband, and she's never going to have the kids. So she takes matters into her own hands. And she learns where Judah is going to work next, what area he's going to work in with his livestock. And she dresses herself up as a prostitute. And she covers her face so she can't be identified. And then she puts herself into Judah's path. And that's all she had to do. Judah, the Bible says, comes into the town, and he sees this prostitute, doesn't know that it's Tamar, and he propositions her. He's the one that initiates it. He goes to her and says, I want to hire you. And she said, well, what are you going to pay me? And he's like, I'll give you a goat. You don't have a goat. And Judah says, well, I'll have to send for it. I'll pay you later. Can we make this transaction on credit, right? No, you can't do that. But I tell you what, Tamar says, if you will give me your ring, if you will give me your ring, I want your ring and your cord and your staff. Now, the cord was simply like a lanyard. So they would have had a ring, some kind of ring, maybe it was just a ring kind of like this, but it had some kind of identifying mark on it so that they would know who that is. So maybe it was engraved or had some sort of coloring or design to it. And then the cord was a lanyard or a necklace that sometimes it was a bracelet. They could keep it on their wrist. But it was a way of tracking that ring. And then the staff oftentimes was personalized as well. So it would be like in modern day vernacular, it would be like, all right, I need your driver's license, your credit card, and your cell phone. Right? This is a very personal thing. He wants this put up, she wants this put up as collateral. I want these things until you bring me that goat that you promised me, and then I'll give these things back. And Judah's like, I don't care, I just want to sleep with you. So sure, here, take it. All yours. Let's do this. And they do. And so then Judah, being a man of his word, he sends his buddy that we talked about earlier, Hira, the Canaanite, he sends him back with a goat. When they get back home, he gives a goat. He sends him to take care of this kind of in secret. It's like a real quiet hush-hush thing because, it's not a real popular thing you want to be known for, right? So he sends his buddy to take care of this, and he goes with the goat, and he's looking for the temple prostitute, and he can't find her. And he asks them, where is the temple prostitute or the cult prostitute? Now, that's another interesting marker in this story here, right? It wasn't just sexual sin that Judah was involved in. It was pagan worship. Judah, a son of Israel, was propositioning a cult prostitute for sex. The apple had fallen very far from the tree. And they tell Hira, hey, there is no temple prostitute here. So he goes back home and he tells Judah, I couldn't find her. In fact, they said there isn't one. And he's like, that's weird. Well, I'll just let her keep my ring and my staff. And because I don't want word to get out that I gave those things away over something like this. That would make me look bad. So, you tried to give the goat. We kept our word. We're men of honor. And so it is. We'll just move on with life. So they move on with life. And about 3 months later, some people come to Judah and say, hey, Judah, your daughter-in-law, Tamar, she's been acting like a prostitute, and now she's pregnant. Judah's response, burn her to death! We need to kill this woman! So they go to get Tamar. Oh, Judah. That guy's a character, isn't he? So they go to get Tamar. And Tamar, in the middle of the night, secretly sends to Judah and says, hey, just want you to know, the father of my child owned these items, a ring, a cord, and a staff. Uh-oh. Judah's tone has changed now. Look at Judah's response now. Oh, it's okay. Never mind. We're gonna stop. Now Judah says, she is more righteous than I am. A woman who disguised herself as a cult or a temple prostitute so that she could have sex with her father-in-law is more righteous than me. This is a breaking point for Judah. Right? Judah is now at the bottom of the barrel. He realizes things have gotten bad. I am way, way out of bounds here. And the Bible tells us that he never was intimate with her again. And then we begin to see some changes in Judah. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, but let's keep going. And Max, my notes aren't right, so I'm just going off the screen here. So I know I'm out of order from some of this, but that's okay. So Tamar, who is now pregnant, gives birth to twins. And her twins, those children's names are, at the end of chapter 38, Zerah and Perez. And I underline those for you in verses 29 and 30. Perez and Zerah. So these are the twin sons that Judah has with Tamar. And that's how this chunk of the story about Judah ends. And then we go right back into Joseph. So what we saw here with Judah was exploit after exploit. Bad behavior from Judah, bad behavior from his sons, an entire family that is so consumed with personal desire and selfishness and self-gratification that look where it has led them to. Things are not good in the house of Judah. But we get a contrast now. And I think that's the whole point of including that story in chapter 38, because he wants to contrast what we saw with Judah from what we now see with Joseph. And this one is a very familiar story to us, right? Joseph is in Potiphar's house, and he is a servant of Potiphar, and the Lord is with him, it says in the beginning of chapter 39. A vast difference already, right, from what we saw in chapter 38. But the Lord is with Joseph, and everything he touches turns to gold. And so Potiphar, of course, gives him more and more responsibility, and everything else he piles onto him just gets better. Right? Can you imagine hiring a personal assistant to help you with some things, and you're like, hey, can you work on these little projects around the house? And all of a sudden, your property value goes up. And you're like, hey, this guy's good. Can you help me with this project I'm doing at work? Boom, you get a promotion. I like this. Hey, Joseph, can you do my taxes for me? Biggest return ever. Right? Like everything he does for you, it gets better for you. Well, yeah, you're going to give him everything in your life. Take care of all of it. Everything you do works out great for me. I don't even have to worry about anything other than what I'm going to eat day to day. That's the biggest worry that I have, because I know Joseph is going to take care of everything else, right? Well, then Potiphar's wife begins to take notice of this. In fact, the Bible says that Joseph was a well-built and handsome man. And maybe that's why I like the story of Joseph so much, because I can relate. But Joseph, Potiphar notices him, and she's like, he's a looker. And everything he does works out. And she gets attracted to him. And so she comes to him and says, sleep with me, Joseph. And Joseph says, no. Are you kidding me? Like, Joseph is shocked by what is happening here. He's like, how could I possibly, I can't fathom this. Potiphar's wife, we don't even know her name, Potiphar's wife. How could I do this? Your husband, my master, has given me run of his house. There is nobody in this house greater than me, and the only thing he has withheld is you for himself. How could I possibly do that to him? And even more than that, how could I commit this sin against God? I can't do it. And we applaud Joseph for this. Great job, Joseph. That's integrity, right? Like, you did good. You knew it was wrong and you didn't do it. But then the Bible tells us that this happened day after day after day. Let me give you a little context about Potiphar's wife, kind of what we don't know. We don't even know her name, like I said, but what might we know, just piecing some things together historically. She was the wife of a very wealthy and prominent official in Egypt. So she probably is pretty accustomed to getting her way. It's not very common that she would be told no, right? Secondly, she is the kind of person who, in most instances, they would have been the more physically appealing people. The wealthy people had the pretty wives, right? So she probably was a person that just used her appearance or her status to get whatever she wanted. And that didn't work on Joseph. It is also possible, because the Bible calls Potiphar an officer in Egypt. That word officer is also the same word used for a eunuch. And some scholars believe that Potiphar was in fact a eunuch. And so maybe it is the case that Potiphar's wife was coming to Joseph to fulfill something for her that her husband simply couldn't. But in any case, Joseph knew that it was wrong. And as the story goes, Joseph went into the house to work one day and all of the servants were gone, which was a very atypical thing to happen. A wealthy woman in this culture would not have been alone, which leads us to believe, based on her forwardness and her issues of propositions earlier that we saw, that she probably orchestrated this. She would send the servants out so that she had the house by herself with Joseph. This was her opportunity. This was the moment. And this was a crucial moment for Joseph as well. No one would have known. No one would have found out. He could have got away with it. Instead, Joseph says, no. And the Bible says that he ran out of the house, leaving her coat in her hand. So his outer garment, his jacket, she still had. He just shed it off and he took off running. He removed himself from that situation. So that in itself is a great lesson for us. When you're facing temptation, when you're facing a situation that could go sideways on you in a hurry like this, you don't stay in that situation. You move yourself out of it as quickly as you can. And that's what Joseph does. But this final rejection of her was more than she could handle, right? She just couldn't take any more than this. So she cries rape. She falsely accuses Joseph of something he did not do. In fact, he did the exact opposite of what she was accusing him of. But she tells her husband when he gets home this story that she's concocted. And of course, he's angry, right? He's outraged over this. And he has Joseph, the guy who has built his house and runs everything for him and has made his life so good, he throws him in prison for what he has done to his wife. Allegedly. And this really seems backwards to us, doesn't it? That we see Judah doing unspeakably immoral things, and he goes free. We see Joseph stand up with integrity and do the right thing, do the God-honoring thing, even though no one was watching, and he goes to prison for it. Anybody ever felt that way? I did exactly what I was supposed to do, and it didn't work out. And I got punished for it. And this guy over here, this joker, I know what he does. And he not only gets away with it, he gets celebrated for it. He gets the promotion. He gets the big job. He gets the girl. Hollywood ending is all his, even though I know what kind of person he is. And yet me, I did things right. And look what it got me. No good deed goes unpunished, right? We all feel that way at various times. But here's what I kind of want us to take away from this. There's a couple of truths about these injustices that we feel. And I put injustice in parentheses because sometimes it is genuinely an injustice. And sometimes it's a perceived injustice because we don't have the whole picture, right? So the first one of these is this. Integrity doesn't always lead to reward. In fact, it often leads to resistance. That's what we saw with Joseph, right? That he had integrity, he did what was right, and yet it backfired. I mean, think about the trajectory of Joseph's life. It was like what a lot of ours feel like. 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Right? You never make progress if you take 2 steps forward and then 3 steps back. Right? I'm further back than when I started. And that's Joseph. Joseph, he has this coat. He's got these dreams and things are really good. He takes 2 steps forward and then his brothers throw him in a pit and sell him into slavery. And he works his way up with Potiphar and he's greatest in all of his house. And then he's falsely accused and he's thrown into prison. And now he's even further back than where he started at 17 years old with the dream. Anybody ever feel that way? That you are further from where you ultimately wanted to go in life than when you first thought about going in that direction in the first place? And Joseph is there because he had integrity. Which leads me to ask us the question, where is God calling you to display integrity or to take a stand, even if it might cost you something? Joseph had to know that wasn't going to end well, that there was going to be conflict there with Potiphar's wife, right? But he was willing to risk all of that to take that stand because he knew it was right? Are you willing to do what's right, even if you know it's not going to pay off right away? Secondly, God sees what happens in secret. Notice how both of these stories in chapter 37 and 38, both of these are under the cloak of secrecy, right? What happens in chapter 38 is done in secret, with the sons and Tamar, and then with Judah secretly going to a prostitute, and then her sending in secret notes about what the items that were exchanged were. That's all done in secret because he didn't want word to get out. And then we see here something in secret in an empty house when no one else is around. Both of these are examples of things that happen in secret, and yet God saw what happened in each one. And that's a good reminder for us on both sides of this, all right? That secret sin that you try to hide, that you try to cover up, that you don't want anybody to know about, God knows about it and he will deal with it. But on the other side, those moments where you have integrity, when you do the right thing and you don't think anybody notices. And in fact, a lot of times people can't notice because they don't know what's going on. Those moments when you stand up for what is right and it doesn't seem like it's working out, God sees that too. Which should encourage us a little bit, right? The third truth about these injustices is that God's presence matters more than your circumstances. His presence matters more than your circumstances. I find this fascinating that when we compare 37 or chapter 38 and chapter 39, that in chapter 38, God is noticeably absent from these stories about Judah and his kids, other than to issue the punishment of death on and Onan. But the whole Judah and Tamar exchange, all of that, God is absent from that. And yet twice in chapter 39, as a slave in Potiphar's house and as a prisoner in the jail, the Bible tells us the Lord was with Joseph. God's presence in your life is not determined by the circumstances around you. It doesn't matter how comfortable you are and how perfect things are going. And if everything is all peachy, then God's presence is with you. And if everything is falling apart, then God has abandoned you. That is not how God works. He is noticeably silent in the story of Judah. But as I mentioned earlier, we do see a change in Judah. When Judah realizes, when Tamar unveils that it was actually him who got her pregnant, and he says, "She is more righteous than I." I think this is a major moment in Judah's life, that we see this change in him, that he recognizes the severity of his sin. And guys, that is the best place that we can be when we hit rock bottom and we recognize the severity of our own sin. Because until we get to that point, I think it's very hard for us to genuinely be repentive of our sin and to recognize the grace of God and be able to experience the grace of God in the way that he wants us to when we don't even think what we've done is that bad. Judah is at a point where he knows things have messed up. And this is one of the things that we can learn from Judah in this. I think what we can learn from Judah is that when impulse leads, our integrity breaks. And when our integrity breaks, regret follows. If you are not living with integrity, if you are allowing your impulses, your desires to make your decisions, it's going to erode your integrity. And if your integrity is weak, I promise you, you are going to regret what happens next. But the good news that we have here about Judah is that does not have to be the end of the story. And it does not have to be the end of your story either. If you're at that place now where you're recognizing what you have done is wrong and that you are aware of how severe your sin is, you don't have to sit there and go, well, God can't use me now, because look at what God does to Judah. When all is said and done, Judah, he actually he returns to the family. He displays some sacrifice and some maturity and sacrifices himself for his family and to protect and preserve the honor of his father. And look at chapter 49, verse 8 and 10. I'm going to put it on the screen here for you. Jacob, at the end of his life, is saying these final parting words to his sons. And he says to Judah, "Your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the necks of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. Judah is a young lion. My son, you return for the kill. You crouch. He lies down like a lion or a lioness. Who dares to challenge a lion?" Right? None of us. "The scepter will not depart from Judah, or the staff from between his feet, until he whose right it is comes." Circle that. He whose right it is comes, and the obedience of the peoples belongs to him. Jacob declares that Judah is going to be a line of kings. This is the same Judah who slept with his daughter-in-law, who he thought was a cult prostitute, right? Remember that. This is what happens with Judah, the line that was chosen by God to in his great-grandfather Abraham that passed along to Isaac and then to his father Jacob, and now that rulership in the line of Jacob's fourth-born son, Judah, is a kingly line. This is how the broken, wayward Israelite not only finds redemption, but he finds that God uses his failings in the lineage of the ultimate king. When we look at Matthew chapter 1 and the genealogy, which is kind of the basis of our entire 43 for 52 series that we're doing this year, and when we look at that genealogy of Jesus, look at what Matthew 1 verse 3 says. Judah fathered Perez and Zerah by Tamar. Judah is in the lineage of Jesus. Joseph is not. That kingly line comes through Judah. In fact, this whole sordid encounter between Judah and Tamar is not only included in the genealogy of Jesus, but this same Judah is referenced in Revelation chapter 5 when the world is ending and all things are coming to their culmination and everybody is sad and brokenhearted because there's no one strong enough to open the seals of God. And yet John says, an angel told me, "Do not be afraid, do not be sad, do not cry, because the Lion of Judah is here. The descendant of David, he is able to open the seal, to open the scroll and the 7 seals, because he has conquered. He is the Lion of Judah." So we learn from Judah that a lack of integrity can lead to a lifetime of regret, but with the hope of a redemption legacy. But honestly, I think it would be better for us to not have to travel that road, right? Yes, God can use our brokenness, but how many of us want to have a lifetime of regret behind us in order to see that happen? None of us, right? How many of us would rather be obedient and see God use us without all of the regret? All of us, right? And that's what we see with Joseph. Joseph is a reminder that when we do things right, that it may introduce undesirable setbacks. But it keeps us on the right path overall. You know, his integrity didn't prevent him from going to prison. In fact, it actively contributed to him going to prison, right? But his integrity did prepare him for what would come next. And most importantly, his integrity meant that God was with him. And that's a key takeaway for us. That God's presence is not proven by your comfort or by your comfort level, but by the depth of your character. Joseph displayed character, and I think that's part of why we see him say a couple of times in here that God was with him. When no one was watching, when there was no applause, when obedience actually hurts, that's when character is formed. And for some of us in here, we might be in a season like that, where we feel like we are in the prison, or that we're in a prison that we haven't done anything to deserve to be there. We feel trapped, we feel imprisoned, or chained down. But if you're walking in obedience, I want to remind you that God is using it. And he's working something in you and through you that you don't yet quite comprehend. So stay faithful where you are, because God is preparing you for something ahead. Imagine how different this story would have gone if Joseph had said yes to Potiphar's wife. You ever think about that? He had every opportunity. Very few people would have blamed him if he did. In fact, no one probably would have even found out about it. But if he had said yes to her, if he had had a break in his integrity, he never would have gone to prison, which was what opened the door for him to gain the audience with Pharaoh and interpret dreams, right? And then from that, he was put in power over Egypt. And from there, he was given the opportunity to interact with his brothers and to see that original dream come true and to save not just his family of brothers and his father, but to preserve the entire Abrahamic lineage. Breaking his integrity would have put all of that at risk. So don't settle for a shortcut. Don't sell out for some kind of immediate gratification like Judah did in his earlier years. Don't sell out your future purpose for your present comforts. Walk in integrity even when no one is looking. Because and I'm going to end you with this, to compromise your integrity is to diminish your experience of God's presence, of his power, and his purpose in your life. And I don't want that for any of us. Let's pray. God, we are thankful for your presence in our lives. We're thankful that you continue to use us. And I pray for strength, that we would have the integrity to stand for what's right, to do what is right in your sight, to not chase after the selfish things and the pleasurable things that we want, that we know are not honoring of you. Would we discard all such pursuits? Would we act as men and women of integrity in obedience to you rather than people who seek after our own desires and do what is evil in your sight? Would you guard our hearts against such behavior? Would we be people of integrity? Would we be people of character so that we can be used greatly by you, so that we can experience your presence, your power, and your purpose in our lives? I pray this week that would be ever on the front of our minds. You do have a purpose for each one of us this week, for the encounters that we have, the people we interact with, the conversations that are had, the conversations that we are to start. I pray we would be obedient to you in all of it, and that we would glorify the name of Jesus through it. In his name we pray. Amen.